Are your business expenses playing hide and seek? With Uber for Business, the small spends that slip through the cracks, like rides and meals, go right where you need them. Because it integrates with leading expense platforms, you can say goodbye to surprise costs, missing dollars, or chasing receipts. Everything's track downable. Uber for Business. Make small steps that make a big impact. Learn more at uber.com/small steps.
This episode is brought to you by Nature's Bounty. Nature's Bounty believes your body is brilliant, naturally designed to thrive, inside and out. For those always looking for new ways to support your health from head to heels, Nature's Bounty has a range of over 400 vitamins and supplements born from 50 years of trust and care. Nature's Bounty. It's in your nature. Visit naturesbounty.com to learn more.
Buckeye Talk is about to begin. Hey, 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 come on in.
Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. I'm Stephen Means, and that's Stefan Krajisnik, and this is your Leave No Doubt pod, your every Monday pod during the season where we try to answer the question, did Ohio State leave no doubt? Sometimes it's going to be very X's and O's game-centric. Sometimes it's going to be maybe looking around the country. Sometimes it's going to be looking at the big picture conversation of Ohio State as they try to repeat as national champions. They are 5-0, 42-3. That's the epitome of leaving no doubt on both sides of the ball. And what we're going to do today is we're going to put this into two different parts. This first segment, just kind of wrapping up the game, thoughts, some things that maybe we didn't discuss yesterday that we feel like we need to discuss today. And then after that, the remaining part of this pod is going to be discussing the way Ryan Day talked during his post-game presser and this idea of 16-0. And do we think that Ryan Day and the mindset of this team, but then also, the talent, what we've seen so far, is Ohio State positioning itself to be 16-0 this year? Is it a real possibility? And what can get in the way of that? And a bunch of other conversations that we're going to have around the idea of not only Ohio State repeating as national champions, but doing so as the first team in college football history to go 16-0. But first, let's start with wrapping up some things that we didn't necessarily get to yesterday. Stefan, should Ohio State have gone for it on 4th and 6 on its opening drive when they kicked the 53-yard field goal? Or not? Was that the right call?
I thought it was the right call. You were kind of in that awkward in between of distance of going for it and not going for it, and weird field position. And I think it was a good opportunity, knowing you trust yourself to win that game even when you're down 3-0, and you trust yourself to win it by a wide margin. It was a good chance to kind of see what Jaden Fielding's got, put him out there, right? Because we had heard him talk about earlier in the week of having the leg for like a 60-yarder. He had, I think in practice, had attempted a 60-yarder or something along those lines. And I think he had missed it either left or right, but it had the leg. And I think you kind of wanted to see, all right, well, what's it going to look like if we put this guy out there in a situation where he's kicking, 53 yards on the field goal against Minnesota. So I didn't hate it. Had it been like 4th and 2, 4th and 1, I'd probably go for it. I think you were kind of just in an awkward in between where, all right, you got an opportunity to tie the game and see what your kicker is made out of. So I didn't hate the decision in real time, and upon rewatching it, I didn't really feel much differently about it.
So now that I didn't have a problem with it either, because I didn't have a problem with the punt later in the game either, because I think this is the type of game where you'd rather find out whether your guy can make a 50-yard field goal or not now,
right?
Versus, I don't know, in the Peach Bowl of a college football playoff game where if he makes it, you go to the national championship game. And if you don't, your season is over. So from that perspective, I was fine with it. But also with the context that Ohio State hasn't made a 50-yard field goal since 2019 at Northwestern that year, I think they need to be done trying 50-yard field goals. So my answer is twofold. I don't have a problem with it against Minnesota because that was never going to, right? We're not sitting here going, it's going to cost you the game. I mean, they won 42-3. So what? They would have won 45-3. All right, whatever. But I think the next time it's 4th and 6. Now you know what to do, and it's not send your special teams unit out there. I think they should, especially with the way your defense is playing. I think they need to just go for it. 4th and 6 on your side of the field. If you're outside the 40-yard line, go for it. In my opinion.
Yeah, I think you hit it there. The way that Ohio State's defense is playing is, for the most part, you can be, pretty aggressive on 4th down decisions. And I think this pretty immediately, you can kind of picture yourself with Ohio State facing a situation in Ann Arbor in a couple months, or about a month and a half, or whatever it is now. And you're probably telling yourself, hey, Ryan Day, you should probably go for it. Because you learned the hard way last year against Michigan that Jalen Fielding was going through some kind of struggles, whether it was injury or whatever it was, and it cost you the game. And now if it's 4th and 5, and you're at the 35-40 yard line at Michigan in November, you should probably just go for it. So yeah, I'm with you. I mean, anything beyond 45-50 yards, I'd be a bit hesitant with this field goal unit for Ohio State. And because of the defense that you have available at your disposal, it's probably not going to hurt you to be aggressive. Because at this point, if Ohio State's defense starts to drive at the 40 versus like inside the 10-yard line, I trust them to get a 3 and out regardless of where they are.
No, change anything. All right. We'll be back in 3 plays. Or at worst, a team drives down to the 1-yard line, and then they still don't get any points out of it, because apparently nothing is harder than 1 yard against this Ohio State defense. Okay, that was point number 1 for me. Point number 2 for me. Should Ohio State keep trying the Lincoln Kienholz package?
Yes. If Lincoln Kienholz listens to what Ryan Day very clearly, to those who are talented lip readers, very clearly said on the sideline, why the bleep are we running sideways? Lincoln Kienholz, we can continue seeing the Lincoln Kienholz package if Lincoln Kienholz runs forwards and gets the yard that they need him to get. I would be hesitant on 4th down. I like the Lincoln Kienholz package on like a 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2. I think I would be a bit more hesitant on 4th down. You know what you might hate? You know what package I really like? The C.J. Donaldson fullback package.
Oh, no, I love that. I thought you were going to say the T formation, and I was going to stop the podcast.
I like the T formation when it's Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. I'm a little bit more hesitant.
I can get behind that.
Also, by the way, Will Howard as the guy under center. I like, for short yardage situations, I like the C.J. Donaldson one, because that's another element of something you have to think about as defense. Listen, they could hand it off to Nate Roberts, and actually, it might not be a terrible idea, I guess, at some point to hand it off to Nate Roberts and try to, trick a team up. But with CJ in there, that's 2 guys in the backfield who the defense genuinely has to think about getting the ball. And I think what's interesting is Ohio State, like they had done the fullback run with CJ to score the touchdown. But if you remember, upon watching a rewatch, they ran it also earlier in a short yardage situation where they gave it to CJ. So like Minnesota knew they had to defend against that, and they still struggled to stop it. So I'm okay with the Kienholz package, maybe not on 4th down, but I did walk out of that game saying, hey, the CJ Donaldson fullback idea, I actually don't hate. I actually think too, you could on like a 2nd and 1 or a 3rd and 1 line up in that, and instead of handing it off to CJ or even handing it off to Bo, you could kind of pitch it to Bo and try to get a big play going to the outside. Like, I think there's a lot of elements to what you can do with that formation and that play, to where it could convert pretty easily in a short yardage situation. It could also break a big play for you in a moment where maybe it feels like you need to break the game open a bit.
And that's why it's so important to establish the first part of that, which has been hit or miss so far this year. It feels like getting across the plane has been a difficulty. But I think the one they ran out in the middle of the field, I think Carnell Tate was the running back.
Was that what it was? Was it that play?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember it happening in the press box and us being like, what is going on?
Yeah. So I'm interested with that as setting up, or maybe it's just as simple as we just wanted Bo Jackson closer, so the exchange between the quarterback and the running back happens quicker. Like, sometimes they're not setting up anything. It's just we're trying to figure out how to get a yard, man. Everything doesn't have a million different working pieces to it, but that's when but as soon as you give them that benefit of the doubt, they play action that bad boy and they have a swing pass to Carnell Tate. Or they bring Jeremiah Smith on an end around, and Carnell's the only one out on a route, and it's him and a DB, and then unfortunately the DB is not as good as Carnell Tate, and now it's his play action touchdown. We're like, there's 7 people reacting to the fact that they thought Jeremiah Smith got the ball in the end around. What an execution for Julian Sand. Those are the 2 things I had. Actually, I'm lying. I had one more. This one's not really a football thing. It was just funny. They kept talking about on the broadcast how Matt Patricia actually doesn't bring a lot of pressure, but he's constantly showing you that he might bring pressure. Matt Patricia told us a lot of this in fall camp, right? Just because I'm showing you something, that doesn't mean that's what I'm doing. But it also doesn't mean that's not what I'm not doing. My job is to keep you on your toes. 7 pressure. Arvell and Sonny up the A gap, and then it's your defensive lineman, and then it's Caleb Downs who loops in behind Arvell and Sonny. So it's 3 different. It's Ohio State's 3 freakiest defensive players all coming through the A gap to come take Drake Lindsey's head off. They get it. They set up the protection wall so they don't actually get to him, but he's got to get this ball out quick. And I think it's why I love that Jermaine Mathews is the field corner, because he's so great at jumping a route and getting a pick. That is a prime example of you are under so much pressure and you know you got to get this ball out quick, and there's only one place you're going to go with it, so I'm going to jump this. He almost jumps it, almost gets the pick. He's sick he doesn't get the pick, and I just put this on Twitter. If you look in the background, Ryan Day knows it's supposed to be a pick, and he is animated that Jermaine didn't get there. Mark Pantoni, you'd have thought just getting the ball out was a success, because as soon as Drake Lindsey releases the ball, Mark Pantoni is like, because he just knows, oh, Jermaine's got this, and he's taking us to the house. But then we're reminded why Jermaine Mathews plays cornerback and not wide receiver. So that was just funny. It's just the reason it's funny because those 2 things happen. It's interesting because it felt like all game Matt Patricia kept showing pressure but never actually sent it. And he pretty much spent 4 quarters setting up, now it's time to go create a turnover. And it worked perfectly. It's just Jermaine didn't catch the football. And that has been Matt Patricia for 5 games, toying with the minds of offensive coordinators and quarterbacks, to where the entire game he's telling you to stay on your toes, stay on your toes, stay on your toes, because eventually I'm coming to get you. And no matter how much anxiety you have, you're never ready when he actually comes to get you. I wish we were talking to Matt Patricia this week.
I also think it's setting up for one game where he's just uber aggressive, and he does send the pressure a lot. And I think it might be Penn State, because they don't have the weapons to get open quick enough on the outside. So
the quarterback is quick enough to process it either.
Yeah, I think you send it at Drew Aller as much as you can, and you say, all right, you're gonna get the ball out quick. Who are you throwing it to? Where are you going with? Now, obviously, Penn State has, in theory, a decent rushing attack, so you do have to respect that a bit. But at some point, if Ohio State has, let's say a 10-point lead, a 14-point lead against Penn State, I start bringing the pressure at Drew Aller, see what he does with it.
I appreciate this defense so much because, yes, it's a bunch of really freaky dudes doing freaky things, but it doesn't feel like Ohio State's entire defensive scheme is we have better players than you and they just need to play better than you. There's sophistication. I've spent 20 years in the NFL where that's not good enough. Just having good players is not good enough. Will Campbell, the left tackle from LSU, is in the NFL now. There's a viral quote that constantly pops up on my timeline of him going, the difference between the NFL and college is, in college there's good teams and there's bad teams. In the NFL, there are no such thing as bad teams because even the bad teams have Pro Bowlers on them. So when that's the mindset that is now running your defense, I'm about 75% sure that Ohio State could win 10 games if they just ran cover 1 and cover 2 all day. Cover 1 and cover 3 all day and sprinkled in a little bit of cover 2 when it was necessary and didn't blitz, played strictly press man, and asked its front line to just go get after the quarterback and win. I'm pretty confident they could win 10 games doing that, especially now that we've seen what their schedule has turned into. I'm also pretty confident that they're going to go 10-2, lose to Michigan, and not win a national title or a Big Ten title if they do that. Because at some point, you got to diversify. And the fact that we are 5 games in and already seeing that level of diversification, it's fun to talk about the defense. Because we're not just going, hey, how come Caden Curry didn't win his one-on-one? We're going, no, Caden Curry's on the edge this play. Now he's like lined up as a defensive tackle in their rushman package sometimes. Right? Devin Sanchez is playing outside corner, and he got beat on one play that probably should have been a Minnesota touchdown. But true freshman. whatever. Jermaine Matthews is playing nickel and outside corner. Caleb Downs is in a different spot every time you blink. Like there's a sophistication to this defense that I don't want this to turn into like we're ragging on the guy who was Ohio State's defensive coordinator and just gave up 42 points to Nico Iamaleava, but there was not this sophistication with the defense over the last 3 years. It was, we have NFL players, they need to act like it, and if they don't, we don't know what to do with ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, you even saw in a short yardage situation when I think we talked about this situation on the postgame pod when PJ Fleck was pretty blunt about why when down 14-3, he went for that fourth down at midfield and kind of the approach he had.
Yep.
There was not a lot of times last year where even in those situations, we saw Ohio State bring in an extra defensive tackle, right? Like their D-line kind of stayed their D-line no matter what it was. In this case, we saw it was Will Smith, Jarquez Carter, and then was it Edric out there?
Yeah.
Like when would we have ever seen that last year? A 4th and 1 to have those three guys out there with the rest of the defensive line? We would have never seen that.
No.
Even in these short yardage situation, you're seeing different things. You're seeing different looks, different players. It just makes you feel more confident about what this team can do, regardless of the style of team or the style of scheme that they're going to go up against, whether it be the playoff or later this season.
Anything else you want to bring up from Saturday?
I want to bring up Mylan Graham. Second game in a row where we saw him get snaps in like significant moments. He got one in the first quarter against Minnesota. I can't remember exactly when it was when they were at Washington, but the game was still, I think, within a possession or two when we saw him out there. I think you're not seeing, like, they're not throwing it his way. They're not, it's not some, Mylan Graham package where they're, throwing it to him 5 times in one drive. But we always say, like, when guys are playing, that means they're at least earning the trust of the coaching staff, right? Like Devin Sanchez, we said that week 1 against Texas. Jarquez Carter, we said it when we saw him, get some snaps. I think he got some snaps against Texas, if I'm not mistaken. Like we're seeing Mylan Graham slowly get some more snaps from Brian Hartline and Ryan Day. I think that's a good sign of where he's progressing as a receiver, because we didn't see a ton of him in those first 3 games. At least not until the Grambling and the Ohio games were basically over. In garbage time. Like we're seeing him against Washington and Minnesota, Ohio State's first 2 Big Ten games, getting in there in formations where the outcome of that play has, at least at that point, a significant impact on the game.
Looking at his snap counts right now, he played 16 snaps. Granted, I think the 2s played the last series, but yeah, he got in there in real snaps. He played 5 snaps against Washington, only 2 snaps against Ohio, only 2 snaps against Ohio was because Ohio found a way to keep that close, but also Ohio State was not doing what it did on Saturday. It was choosing to do the opposite and drive slow, baby. Yeah. Now, with that paired is Bryson Rogers was, I think, listed as questionable in the availability report pregame, and then he did not dress for the game. So this is, you come into the year, you're assuming if anybody's going to rotate in that receiver, it's probably Bryson Rogers. But we also said it would not be shocking if Mylan Graham overtakes him. Okay, like opportunity. And it seems like he's taking advantage of it in practice. What does that mean for touches? I don't know. Cardinal Tate and JJ get a lot of touches and they're very good at football. But you are right. Promising signs for, what if they get to the Penn State game again and they put in all the backup receivers again and then throw a touchdown pass? They did it last year on the road. Why wouldn't they do that at home? Right? Yeah, because Brian Hartline said it during the bye week that he would like to get more of those guys in the game. He didn't say it in a way that felt like they're not playing because they're not good enough. It was more like they're not playing because I have Greek gods as my starting wide receivers and a captain. You tell me which one of those guys I'm supposed to take off of the field. Quality day for Brandon Ennis as well, even if he only had 1 catch. His game is coming. His game is coming. The way Day talked about, I'll save those thoughts. Let's take a break.
I want to say, let me just say this too, because you mentioned Brandon Ennis. The Minnesota game kind of felt like, hey, like Max Clare is really starting to come along too. And this is what he can be in this offense, right? I think 5 catches for 60 yards is, I think, probably at the season what we expected most like good Max Clare games to look like. And he's a guy who looks like he's confident in this offense, comfortable in this offense, comfortable with Julian Sayin. And it took maybe a game or 2 longer than we thought it was going to take, but it's coming along. And I think he played more snaps than Will Kesmerick in this one. I think they're starting to trust him more and more as well. And he looked the part. He looked like the Max Clare that we talked about all off season.
This was the most balanced we've seen it between he and Will, 29 for Max, 27 for Will, 24 for Brandon Ennis. So I think those three are essentially like that's the tight end slot receiver is okay, who got the most in a given game. But that is why Max Clare is 5 for 63 on 6 targets, where his one Julian Sand had 4 incompletions, and 2 of them were throwaways, and one of them was like, I don't even know what type of throw. It was like he wasn't perfect. He had a couple of bad throws, but if his bad throws are, oh, well, Max Clare catches a ball out of bounds and everything's fine. Max Clare having a breakout game like he did against Minnesota is why I'm saying that Brandon Ennis' game is coming. Because, sure, what Carnell and JJ did, they do that every week. That's just normal behavior. But if you can get Max and Brandon and Will going and you feel like you got you got your top 2 who you know you're going to feed, but then your 3 is some combination of those 3 every single week. And maybe some weeks it's Max with 5 catches. Maybe some weeks it's Brandon Ennis with 5 catches. Maybe there's weeks where it's 2 for Max, 2 for Brandon, 1 for Will. Maybe some week it's Will. But to have a rotating number 3, I don't think is a bad thing when you have this many weapons and you have this much faith in your tight ends. That's all I got. They won by 39 points. I have no doubts about that. I picked them to win 38-3, and they just scored another touchdown instead of a field goal. So I have no doubts. So let's take a break, and then more big picture, talking Ohio State. Do we think they can go 16-0 in 2025 when we come back from the break here on Buckeye Talk?
Finish training for the day? Time to fight post-workout fatigue with Core Power Protein Shakes. They're packed with 26 grams of high-quality protein to build muscle and electrolytes to help hydrate. The nutrition you need to help your body replenish, rebuild, and repair post-workout so you can power on to the next one. Champion your recovery with Core Power. Visit corepower.com to learn more.
Big news. Sephora is now on Uber Eats. So if you find yourself facing a beauty emergency, like needing a last-minute gift, or you're just out of your favorite mascara, again, don't panic. We got you. Order now and get $10 off on Sephora orders of $50 or more on the Uber Eats app. Order now. Offer ends October 30th. One order per customer. Additional terms apply. See app for availability. Delivery fees may apply.
And we're back here on Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means, Stefan Krajisnik. This is your Leave No Doubt pod. This is where we answer the question every week. Did Ohio State leave no doubt? And I want to start at the end of the game during Ryan Day's presser, where I texted you in the middle of it when he was running through, like he went on long spiels on like 4 people's questions. I think he did it for yours. He did it for mine. He did it for Rob, where it wasn't even, I don't feel like he was even talking about Minnesota at all. What did you take away from how Ryan Day chose to handle a presser where they won 42-3 against a Big Ten opponent and they finally let their quarterback loose?
I want to do, maybe I could post this on Twitter so people can get a visual of what I'm talking about. I want to do a side-by-side of the way Ryan Day talked after that game, unprompted by questions, and the way Brian Kelly responded after his team beat Florida, and he went off because someone asked about his team's struggling running game. And I understand maybe that's not the first question that should have been asked at the presser, but at its core, the question was fair. And Brian Kelly snapped as if it's completely bizarre to question LSU's running game because they won by 10 against a bad Florida team at home. Like, Ryan Day, I can't remember the question off the top of my head, but was basically just asked about whatever. And he kind of started going off on, a missed block here, a bad play here. I think he talked about the Lincoln Keenholz play that fell short and how that's unacceptable. And like just went on and on about things that Ohio State did that it needs to get cleaned up, completely unprompted in a game that his team won by 40. And there's other coaches who have national championship aspirations, and they think it's bizarre to even question something that their team might not be great at. Which, by the way, LSU, I think, lost, if not the following week, then 2 weeks after that to Ole Miss. Ohio State is very comfortable in its own shoes. I think there's not a lot of insecurities with Ryan Day and his coaching staff, and they're not afraid to call out mistakes when there's mistakes to be called out because they understand what the goal is here. The goal is to be the best version of Ohio State because that version beats anybody, right? It doesn't matter who's on the other side of the field, whether it's Minnesota, whether it's Miami or Oregon or Texas A&M or Indiana or Ole Miss, like the teams that are ranked toward the top right now, it does not matter if Ohio State's playing the best version of its game, which means that even in wins, you can find ways that you need to improve. And not only you talk about Ryan Day talking about it post game, Sonny Styles just balled out in that game. They held Minnesota to 3 points. He's talking in his media scrum afterward, saying that they remember last year losing to Oregon and Michigan and coming back for those Sunday meetings and, having a real, calling each other out and finding the flaws and things like that. And he said that on Sundays when they meet, they ask themselves, what would this meeting look like if we had lost yesterday? So they just beat Minnesota 42-3, and they're asking themselves, okay, what would this meeting look like if we had lost? What would you call out? What are the flaws? What are the things that you would point out if we had lost the game instead of winning it? That approach is, as you texted me during Ryan Day's presser, the most like Nick Saban we've ever heard him be, right? Like that approach is why a team like Ohio State can think about going 16-0. They can think about going 16-0 because they don't think about going 16-0. They think about being the best version of themselves on that Saturday. That is how you end up accomplishing that goal, right? Because, there's a fumble early in the Washington game and Washington's moving the ball a little bit and they're making things interesting. It doesn't matter because once Ohio State started playing their game, Washington couldn't do anything. Minnesota, good opening drive. They go up 3-0. Ohio State misses a field goal. Oh, it's getting interesting. It doesn't matter. Because once Ohio State starts clicking, it doesn't matter what Minnesota's doing. Same with Ohio. That was a game in the second half against a MAC team. And it's 13-9. And you're thinking to yourself, holy crap, what's going on? The moment Ohio State cleaned up their side of it, it's not like Ohio was making a ton of mistakes and Ohio State took advantage. No, Ohio State just started playing its brand of football and started playing or executing at a higher level. Like that's the kind of stuff that makes super teams, undefeated teams, national championship winning teams, whatever it may be. The fact that Ryan Day and one of his captains is saying the same thing, like that is why we can have this conversation about 16. That is why Ryan Day has one loss to an unranked team. And like we talked about yesterday, like, rivalries are rivalries, right? He has to start beating Michigan, no doubt. But like losing to an unranked rival is different than losing to an unranked, Minnesota or an unranked Washington or something like that. UCLA, right? Like that's unacceptable, So that's the kind of stuff where Ohio State has the right approach. And I just couldn't get out of my mind rewatching that clip of Ryan Day calling out things that Ohio State did wrong. And I'm thinking a couple weeks ago, Brian Kelly, who now his team is playing to stay alive in the playoff hunt, was going off on reporters for even thinking to ask about a struggling running game because they had a good run at the end of the game. They had one good run at the end of the game. And therefore, that question's unacceptable.
A couple weeks ago, I asked Day about that concept because, they're not wrong. Winning is the most important. I've been trying to think of a way to write this story for a couple of weeks, and it's one of those things that it always sounds like a simple thing to execute in your head, but it's a lot of layers to it when you actually have to, map it out. But winning is the most important thing, right? It's the most important thing. But style points matter a little bit. They matter a little bit less because we're not in the BCS area anymore, and it's a little bit more wiggle room. But like the stuff that Day keeps talking about, how like the issues are the issues regardless of who you're playing. If you're bad at something, you're gonna be bad at something, regardless of whether somebody can take advantage of it or not. And for a couple of weeks now, he's mentioned it shouldn't take a loss to fix the issues. Just fix the issues. So I love the way that you talked about how Sonny talked about it, because why do you have to get to where you were after that Michigan loss last year to finally get your act together and play like a championship team? As cool as that story is to talk about a team that was at its lowest point it's ever been and it somehow climbed out of that hole and reached the mountaintop, that's great. What if you don't go in the hole? What if you just keep climbing the mountain and get to the mountaintop? This don't have to be close. It's already difficult. Don't make it. Winning football games is not easy. Even if you're playing a team with 300 fans in the stands and it's already 0-4 and has fired its head coach. Winning football games is not easy. So don't help it not be easy. And I felt like Saturday night, Ryan Day was agitated and they won 42-3. He complimented the people that needed to be complimented: Max Clare, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis. And I felt like that compliment was less of a compliment and more of an acknowledgement. Because I even think he says, we all know they're good, but sometimes it's great to hear that from your coaches. Because let's be real here, those four have been sacrificing a lot over the last month while they've been slow playing the quarterback development, right? Brandon Ennis and Max Clare may be a little bit more than JJ and Carnell, but there are weapons here that could go anywhere else and get the ball a lot. But because of how Ohio State has chosen to operate, they're not getting the ball at all and being asked to just be blockers and just be patient while they slow play this. So he complimented that. And then, as you mentioned, he went into, I think he called Lincoln, dumber and dumber.
Yeah, something like that. He talked about Bo Jackson on second down, reaching the ball out and being like, yeah, that's how you fumble. It's like Bo Jackson reached the ball out in a 42-3 win. And his coach literally was like, I'm just going to be straight up with you guys, and like called that out. Brian Kelly had a running back, had a nice run to seal a game against Florida, and was like, don't you dare question me.
When did that happen? I don't remember the reach out.
Yeah, I was looking at the rewatch trying to find it. I think it was pretty early in the game, if I remember.
But that's where his focus was. Hey, good run, Bo. No, why are you reaching the ball out? What are you doing? Don't do that.
Bo had an awesome pressure pickup early in the game. It was the play where Julian maybe slightly underthrew Jeremiah down the sideline. I think really what happened was Minnesota defender just made a great play on it, caught up to JJ and knocked the ball away. But like Bo was a brick wall in front of a blitzing. I think it was a linebacker coming in through the offensive line. So that's pretty impressive to see from a freshman. And he gets called out post game.
Like, it's my first start, coach. Let me figure it out. No, haven't figured it out. Bring it. This man, like Brian Day's quote Navy SEALs.
Yeah, that was crazy. That was crazy. The quote, because Julian Sane brought it up later too, is the like, if you think you've got it, you're about to get it. Like, that's Brian Day's quoting Navy SEALs after winning 43 to Minnesota.
You remember when we were at the coaches clinic the first night and they had the Navy SEAL talking? That's why. Now we see why the Navy SEALs in the building, because Ryan Day is using them to win a national championship. I thought about Brian Kelly. I thought about Dabo these first couple of weeks, this first month, where it felt like he was having pressers where he's like, hey, remember how good we used to be? So what?
Wisconsin's calling their fans spoiled.
It's just the standard here is so different. Every fan, if you're a fan of another team and you look at what Ohio State's had over the last 25 years, 90% of fan bases would take that. In fact, actually, I think the only fan base that wouldn't take that is Alabama and maybe LSU, because even if you have headaches of years, they have the same amount of national championships as Ohio State does. It's just wrapped around nonsense consistently. But are you serious? Like, Ohio State lives in this world of national championship or bust, and that's not always fun. Right? It can't be you didn't win the national championship, so your season was a failure. But that's your standard. That's how we cover this team, and we look at Brian Kelly, and we go, that's a loser mentality to essentially get into a shouting match with a reporter because he called out a very reasonable thing to call out. You can't run the football. Meanwhile, Ryan Day's going, we have an awesome running back, but I swear if he keeps reaching that ball out and putting it in harm's way, I'm going to blow a gasket. Lincoln Keenholz did a great job. He put up his best fight in the battle. We think we can put him in this role. Hit the freaking hole, Lincoln Keenholz. Brandon Ennis is a captain. We respect him. He works hard. He's great for us. We need him. Hold on to the ball. Well, this is just not the same. So what is it? I guess to transition to this into what we're talking about here. Because even the Dabo stuff is like, oh, remember how good we used to be? Ryan Day's, hey, remember, I've gone to the playoff and I have a higher win percentage than Newt Rockne, even though I'm not eligible because I've only been a coach for 7 years. So what? That is the vibe I got from Ryan Day on Saturday night. Ryan, you won by 142-3 against a Big Ten opponent. So what? Hey, Ryan, your quarterback only had 4 incompletions, threw for 326 yards and 3 touchdowns. So what? Hey, Ryan, Jeremiah Smith is amazing. Yes, so what? Hey, Ryan, 9 for 180-something and some change and a touchdown for Carnell Tate. He's pretty good, right? Yeah, so what? Hey, Ryan, your defense has given up 2 touchdowns in 5 games, and it is impossible to move the ball on them. So what? Hey, Ryan, you guys took a borderline 4-star guard and made him your left tackle. And I think you can make the case that he's one of the 15 best offensive linemen in the country right now. So what?
Gave up pressure.
Hey, Caleb Downs, right? So what? I don't think I've ever seen him downplay a win as much as he did on Saturday.
Because I think it was the perfect scenario for him to emphasize what it is that he says. Hey, you know all this stuff that we talk about, why we're harsh on you after a win, why we call out Bo Jackson for stretching the ball out when he shouldn't stretch the ball out? Because when you're on the field warming up, look up at the video board and see what's happening to Penn State. A team that has a ton of proving it. Like Ohio State's trying to implement this stuff with guys who haven't done it before, right? Like Brandon Dennis hasn't had to do it at this level. Right, Max Clare hasn't had to do it at this level. Jalen McClain hasn't had to do it at this level. We opened on the roster all these guys that had to fill in for veteran, experienced starters who had never started before. They're stepping into this role, and you're trying to remind them, hey, this is why we're hard on you, win or lose. You want to know why? Because there's a team that lost and went on the road and was 24-point favorites, and they didn't know what to do.
And their season might be over.
They couldn't rally the troops after a loss. So how do you expect to win a national championship if you're winning games? How do you expect to beat Minnesota when you're 4-0 unless you can point at those wins and say, here's what we did wrong, right? Like that's the only way you can improve. And there's I think a lot of coaches like to harp on this transfer portal era and say, kids these days are soft, and they, the moment you challenge them, they just get up and leave and go to the transfer portal and find somewhere else to go. Okay, a lot of those kids don't succeed. So a lot of the people on Ohio State's roster are at Ohio State because they know it's tough love, and if you can handle it, then you're going to succeed. You're going to win a national title. And how do you remind them of that? You beat Minnesota 42-3, and you say, here's what we got to do better. And by the way, look what happened to Penn State. Look what happened to Texas, preseason number 1. Look what happened to Clemson, preseason number 4. All these teams around Ohio State in the preseason rankings, it doesn't mean nothing because they couldn't handle success. They couldn't handle being a preseason number 1 team and learning from that and losing your season opener and doing something about it.
For the record, that's also the preseason favorite to win the SEC, the Big Ten, and the ACC, all unranked at this point. And none of them played the teams who were picked to finish second in those respective conferences yet. And they've already lost like this. Maybe we can do this on a later pod. Maybe this is a good live show pod for the bye week of what's actually the more impressive roster building technique that Ohio State used, the way they were able to retain so many guys from leaving for the NFL in a world where I don't know if you see that again, or they're now playing with a roster full of guys where, to the point of the transfer portal, how often do we see kids waiting 3 years to get on the field who are apparently good, right? They weren't stuck as bench warmers. No, they were just stuck and they were good apparently. And I think I would love to, during the bye week, if Ohio State does what we think they're going to do over the next 2 games, sit down and really map out and compare 24 to 25 from a construction, coaching staff, personnel, how we got here situation, and really break down, because there's which team is better, what's variation of 2 things that are very rare in college football now is actually better and more impressive. And Ryan Day's done it in back-to-back years. Let's transition this, though, into the 16-0 conversation. I looked up every undefeated team since the BCS started in 1998. So BCS and CFP era. Not every single one's a national champion. And I also looked up how many undisputed back-to-back national championships there have been. Let's start with the undefeated list, because if I just ask you, hey, do you think Ohio State can win a national championship? It's yeah, dude, you've been watching them for a month. So let's start with the undefeated part of this. 1998, it's Tennessee, who goes 13-0 and they win the national championship. Tulane goes 12-0, but they are not winning the national championship. They didn't even play in the game. 1999, Florida State wins it at 12-0, and Marshall also is 13-0 that year. I'm so glad we're not just in the BCS, and so we have undefeated teams who don't have championships. That's weird. 2000, the only one is Oklahoma. They go 13-0 and win the national title. 2001, Miami goes 12-0, wins the national title, only one. And then Ohio State in 2002 is the first ever 14-0 team in college football history, wins the national title, knocking off Miami, who would have repeated as national championships, which I guess we can bring up later in this conversation of back-to-back teams who were close. 2004, you had 3. USC goes 13-0 and wins the Natty. Auburn goes 13-0 and Utah goes 12-0. 2005, Texas knocks off USC, who at that point had a long winning streak as the reigning champions, 13-0, only not undefeated team that year. 2006, Boise State. I think this is the year of the Statue of Liberty play. They go 13-0, but they're not playing in the national championship because group of 5, of course. 2008, Utah goes 13-0. 2009, Alabama goes 14-0 and wins the national championship. I think this is now Saban's off and running with his first one. In 2010, Auburn goes 14-0 and TCU goes 13-0. Auburn wins the Natty. In 2012, Ohio State goes 12-0 in Urban Meyer's first season, but they have a postseason ban from Tattoo-Gate, so they can't go to the national championship. So instead of playing in that, it's Alabama and Notre Dame gets wiped off the planet. Sorry, Andrew, if you're listening. And in 13, Florida State goes 14-0 in the last year of the BCS era. And then we didn't have any undefeated teams in the first couple of years of the CFP, which I think more emphasized the importance of the CFP and expanding the field. 17, UCF goes 13-0, claims the national title, even though nobody gives it to them. In 18, we have a new most wins in a single season. Clemson goes 15-0, first ever 15-0 team in college football history. And they beat Alabama, who was 14-0 heading into that game. So the winner of that game was going to be the first 15-0 team. Then we have another back-to-back 15-0 team with LSU. Super team goes 15-0. And again, it's another situation where they beat a team who recently was the reigning national champion and with a long winning streak. Alabama, 2020, 13-0, national champs, COVID year, so they didn't get to the 15 like they would have. And then Georgia in 2022, and they're back-to-back national champions, which I do want to bring up again later. Of Georgia lost the year before. They didn't lose in 2022. They go 15-0 to win the national championship. And then Michigan in 2023. Shout out to Connor Stallions, 15-0 national champion. So the CFP era has produced 5 national champions who were also undefeated. The BCS era produced 7, 8, 9, 10 national champions who were also undefeated. But the BCS era was also an era where if you lost a game, your championship window might be closed. So we've seen 14-0 get accomplished in the BCS era. We've seen 15-0 get accomplished in the 14 college football playoff era. Do we think we ever see 16-0? Because it can't be 17-0 unless it's. Can Notre Dame get a bye now that they're just straight seeding it?
Yeah, they can.
Okay, so unless it's Notre Dame, it's going to be
the reason why they.
Oh, because they showed that like it doesn't matter if you give us the bye or not, we'll still get to the Natty. That's fair.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was pinned on Boise State. I think Notre Dame not having a chance to get a bye is part of it too.
That plus Oregon having to play Ohio State out the gate probably wouldn't help.
Yeah.
Okay, so unless you're Notre Dame, every other team, the best they can do is 16-0, more than likely. Do you think we see a 16-0 college football national champion at any point? And do we think Ohio State in 2025 has positioned itself, when we look at their regular season schedule, when we look at what they've done, to be that? And how much of it is strictly football versus maybe outside variables like what we were talking about with how Ryan Day handled the presser? That was a lot I just threw at you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's certainly difficult to envision someone going 16-0 just because of how tough the path is now, right? Like the conferences have more teams and good teams in them. The playoff is as difficult as it's ever been, right? The path to winning, in the postseason. And I think after last year, I would have probably told you it'd be really difficult for someone to go 16-0. And you see the way that Ohio State's playing this year. You see the way that Oregon played last year, right? Like had the bracket fallen a different way, they're probably 15-0 going into a national championship game with Ohio State, right? Because of the way that they were playing. So I think we probably will see it at some point in the 12-team era, and maybe even in the 16-team era, we see someone go undefeated. It's hard to predict because a lot of things have to go right. And I think Ohio State's certainly, like if there was like a betting line on one of the apps of like, in the next 10 years, there's going to be an undefeated team. Who's it going to be? Ohio State would probably be a pretty heavy favorite to be that team. Right? So a lot of things have to fall into place. I will say too, if there is a team from the ACC or Big 12 that really kind of solidifies itself in the way that Clemson, was that team in the ACC during the peak, Dabo years, maybe Miami can be that this year. Maybe Texas Tech can be that if they keep, building rosters the way that they've, built a roster this year. And it looks like they're going to continue building rosters that way. Like if you can become a powerhouse out of one of the non-Power 2 conferences, I think there's a path to being undefeated, or at least being 12-0 or 13-0, giving yourself a chance in the postseason. So I think if you would ask me in February, I'd probably lean toward no, it's not going to happen. But I think where things sit today, it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me. I think the sport's also in a really good spot in terms of coaching. Because I think, I know we joke about Dan Lanning, but he's cut from the same cloth as Ryan Day in the sense of like you can call things out after a win, right? Like he's not afraid to call things out after a win and learning from that, right? Like I think there's some coaches like that in the game. They're not all, like Brian Kelly, where they're afraid to criticize things after a win. So I think where Ohio State stands, they're probably the most likely team to do it. Specifically this year, if I were to say which team is the most likely one to do it. But I think I would not be surprised if someone wins 16-0.
If Oregon gets through Indiana this weekend, they got a good shot at it. If Indiana gets through Oregon this weekend, I think they have a good shot at it. I think if Ohio State gets out of its own head against Michigan, they've got a good shot at it. If Miami doesn't do what it has done for the last couple of years under crystal ball, where for whatever reason they get to late October, early November, and they just start tripping over themselves, they've got a good shot at it. I think Texas ain't. I think the SEC is a bunch of mid.
I think the SEC what they've always claimed, they can actually claim this year, that I think they're a bit deeper than the Big Ten, but they don't have the top that the Big Ten has now.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I guess what's more important for the conversation we're having right now in terms of championship contenders, having a bunch of, if both of you are, let's just say both conferences are a B grade right now, but one's got a bunch of teams who are a B versus one's got a bunch of A's or C's. Is it really that different?
No, I mean, I'd rather be the Big Ten right now.
Right, because I'd rather have more teams who I think can win a national title versus a bunch of teams who I think can just make games interesting. And I didn't come on here to rag on the SEC. I did that yesterday when the Big Ten showed its depth. And yeah, that's not, no, I think the Big Ten's pretty deep, man. Sometimes you got to go across the country from Pennsylvania to Los Angeles and play under it. Listen, it's sunny out there. We've been to the Rose Bowl. It's really sunny. The sun can get in your eyes sometimes.
So sunny.
Yeah, man. It forces you to relax even though you're trying to be serious. And before you know it, you're losing. And then you gotta, you ever been in the hot tub before and how your muscles are all relaxed? And then all of a sudden you got to go do something strenuous. It's not easy to do, man. That's difficult. Big Ten country stretches from New York to California. That's hard.
You're saying you feel bad? You feel bad for Penn State?
I do feel bad for Penn State. Listen, it's not their fault they play in a conference where every week is a bloodbath. I can't even take myself serious saying it. I had a problem tweeting it, let alone saying it right now. I didn't completely forgot my point. No, I do know my point. So from Ohio State's perspective, if they're going to do it, they have to repeat as national champions. Here's the national champions who have repeated. Here's the pre-BCS era, so it's before 1998. And these are undisputed because I know there's a bunch of, you claimed it depending on this poll gave it to you or that poll gave it to you. Like Oregon technically claimed the national title in 2024 because some poll gave them the number one seed and whatnot, whatever. Minnesota, ironically enough, this would have been a good week to run that story. But then Penn State lost, and it completely threw off my thought process. Minnesota in 1940 and 1941 went 8-0 in back-to-back seasons and had pre-AP poll consensus national titles. Army in 1945 went 9-0 in both seasons and won national titles. Oklahoma 55 in 1956 under Bud Wilkinson went 11-0 and 10-0, won national titles. Nebraska in their heyday, 94 95, 13-0, 12-0 were consensus national champions in both years. And now we get into the BCS era where there's a football game to decide it, and not just people like you and I voting on these things. Alabama, 2011, 2012, 12-1, 13-1, won the BCS title game in both of those years. USC won back-to-back, but one of them was a voting in the AP poll. That's why they're not in the undisputed conversation. And then Georgia is the only team in the college football playoff era, 21-22, going 14-1 and 15-0. First undisputed repeat in the college football playoff era. So we've got one in the 4 team, one in the BCS, and a couple of them in the pre-BCS era. That's the company Ohio State has to join. What is the difficulty of this? Because I don't think it's as simple as, Ohio State had a bad football game. Like what? We were talking about this as we were walking back to our cars yesterday. Is there any worry of Ohio State burning out? Because in order to win a national title, that's potentially 32 or 33 games in a span of 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible, but the way Ohio State has kind of managed the workload on these players the last, year and a half now is pretty commendable. So that part of it kind of stands out of like, they've actually done a great job of not burning out these guys. And also, your top contributors would maybe fall into that concern, but a majority of your contributors don't, because a lot of them weren't playing in those bigger roles, right? Like I'd maybe be more concerned if Jack and JT and Tyleek and all those guys were back because they played such a big role. Whereas, I don't know, what would Arvell Reese be burned out from? What would Jalen McClain be burned out from? They didn't play as big of roles last year. So I think that plays into it. I mean, the number one thing, obviously, for Ohio State is the Michigan thing, right? Like, if you were to circle, a loss or try to pencil in a loss, it would be that, just because there's more to it than the X's and O's of football. There's a mental side of it. It's the rivalry. Like, that's all you really need to say, and it's understood of why that game would stand in the way for Ohio State. But it is difficult to try to map out like a hard X's and O's way of like how a team beats Ohio State this year. Like, it is the cop-out answer, but like the only way Ohio State doesn't go undefeated is if it gets in its own way. It kind of feels that way, right? Like a game where Ohio State's turning the ball over and not playing clean, and a few things, go this way or that way. And now we're talking about, it's a tie game in the fourth quarter. Maybe kind of similar to the Cotton Bowl last year, to be quite honest, right? Ohio State was cruising through the playoff. It was difficult to envision them losing. And, Travion gets an uncharacteristic penalty, and they're making uncharacteristic mistakes. And all of a sudden, Texas is at the goal line with a chance to tie the game in the fourth quarter. So I don't want to rule that out, but it does feel like if Ohio State plays its game, it's going to be pretty difficult to stop the train.
My only worry is the burnout. And to your point, yeah, these are new. I think resetting the roster the way they did probably helps with that. But even then, after the Michigan loss, they play 4 playoff games, and then you spend 9 months thinking about Texas. You get 2 weeks off from that and a bye week. But now you're back. Now Big Ten play starts, and you're back in it, right? They're going to play Illinois on Saturday, Wisconsin the following week, which is LOL. But I understand, like, Penn State has clearly been a disappointment, but that doesn't mean Ohio State's going to look at that game and view it the same way they view Minnesota, right? They're still going to attack that game as a Penn State's going to make that a fourth quarter football game. I think about, Trevor Lawrence look at that Clemson team in 2019. They were winning at one point, and it just, at some point, it's just the dam breaks. Is it too difficult to be on? Especially, I think with Clemson, they were trying to go undefeated for back-to-back years, so that's very difficult. Georgia had its loss, so they had new life. How much do you try to, after you get that loss, how much new life does that give you when you're trying to bounce back up off the floor? Like, Ohio State's not currently still trying to bounce back up off the floor from that Michigan loss, right? Or is that carrot hanging out there kind of driving this bus along through the regular season? Because then once you get to the playoff, it's tournament play, and you win or you go home, and that's your motivation. But I don't know, is the Michigan part of this enough of a carrot to drive them through this? Had they been just dominating Michigan, would we be more worried about this? As I sit here and watch David Montgomery, who's on my fantasy team, fail to get into the end zone, and I really need him to get into the end zone right now because I need these points.
Yeah, but like, isn't there an element to this though of, like, we spent all offseason about these guys talking about how they're not the ones who won a national title.
Sure. And that's how Saban did it, right? I think when college football, because you're resetting so often, the only person who's actually on edge is the coach.
And Kirby did a good job of that when Georgia went back to back, right? Like,
he threw a touchdown pass. That works too.
He threw one?
Yeah, they did a wildcat package, and then they snuck a tight end out of the back of the end zone.
Was it Laporta?
And I'll take it. I think it was Laporta. Listen, this is the Monday pod. This is what you get. You get us breaking down Ohio State, leaving no doubt, and then you also see us reacting to our football teams and our fantasy teams, maybe doing us proud.
Hey, Quinshon was awesome Sunday morning, except for that stretch where Kevin Stefanski forgot that he was on the roster for whatever reason. But he was pretty awesome otherwise. But like, you think back to the Georgia teams that went back to back. Like, the 21 team is the one that was like the team, right? And then they come back and they go undefeated the next year with all that turnover, especially on the defense.
So is this Georgia? Because you're right. That was, the 21 team was the team, and I think 24 was the team.
Yes, there's an element to college football this year that's starting to feel a bit like the team after the team. And Ole Miss is kind of the example of that, because like that was like Ole Miss's best roster ever last year, and they failed. They didn't make the college football playoff. And then come back and like, okay, what if we're better this year? Indiana last year, they didn't go into the year being like, this is the team. But when the year ended, there was a lot of Indiana fans who were like, oh, wow, that was the team, because that's never going to happen again. And now it's like, okay, what if next year's team's even better? And Ohio State might be there where like last year's team was the team, and they won it all. but they didn't accomplish everything that they sought out to accomplish. And maybe 2024 wasn't the team, but it was actually the team after the team that was the best one.
Now I'm intrigued because the Ole Miss thing is a valid point. The Georgia one is because the team that the team lost to was a team that Kirby Smart struggled with and continues to struggle with his entire tenure, and that's Alabama. So getting that mattered. And Ryan Day's Nick Saban is Michigan. He's got to win over me, but also
It's not, well, first of all, it's not just Nick Saban. It's just Alabama. In the same way that you could say that, though, it wasn't just Jim Harbaugh.
Yep. It's the program. It's something about that program where he can't seem to get over the hump. So that maybe that's the answer. When you finally get over the hump and get your ring, but you didn't get everything that you set out to go get, that can put the battery in your back again. And when you're looking for, a team that's been on edge like this, eventually you fall one way or the other. The thing that's keeping them falling towards the positive side of this thing is they're not like, they haven't reached Tom Brady, Michael Jordan levels of taking things personal that don't make any sense. Their motivations are still tangible things that don't make them look like crazy people in documentaries.
I think Jeremiah Smith might be there.
Jeremiah Smith, no, that's different. That's
everything's personal.
But I think you need that. I think Day was talking about that last Wednesday, the edge. Actually, let's take a break and then we can wrap up with that and then talk a little Julian Sand and then maybe preview the next couple of weeks here on Buckeye Talk.
The family that vacations together stays together. At least that was the plan. Except now the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
And we're back here on Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means and Stefan Krajisnik, your Leave No Doubt pod, where maybe this makes sense, maybe that we're trying to contextualize now that we're in October and you've seen some bad teams and good teams separate. And over the next 2 months, you're going to see pretenders and you're going to see contenders rise. Where's Ohio State fit into this? We think they're contenders, but they're also trying to do something that very few teams have done over the past 25 years, and that's repeat as national champions. The JJ point that he might be a little psycho, put in like the sports way of, hey, Jeremiah, you had 150 yards, 10 catches, and 2 touchdowns. Yeah, but I dropped the ball in the first quarter, so I'm pissed. Hey, JJ, you're the best player on the planet. Yeah, I got cut from my team when I was 8 years old, and I still haven't let that go. Ryan Day's talked about the edge of this team a lot. And he really went into detail with it last Wednesday evening when he even revealed that there had been some fights during spring practice. Like they had to stop practice and go into, we're just going to do conditioning and run gassers because they keep fighting each other. And I think there's a fine line with that. You play a physical violent sport. Sometimes it's going to be fights. And I think as long as it's a healthy amount and it's not just guys beefing with each other, it's fine. But off the top of your head, how many guys on this team would you list off where you think they just might have they're a little off, but in a way that is you want in a football player?
Ooh, this is a fun exercise. Julian Sayin does it in a quiet way. Julian Sayin is his coach, high school coach. When I interviewed him, talked about him as a silent assassin. Like he is very much.
He's so nice, but I think I think it'll get you if you're not paying attention. So that's one. Julian's your quarterback's like that. That's good.
Yeah. Philip Daniels, without a doubt.
It's not a conversation.
Carson Hinsman, Luke Montgomery, without a doubt.
Yes.
And I think Austin Sareveld also does it in a quiet way. I count him in that because Austin Sareveld, when we talked to him, maybe it was either after the Grambling game or after the Ohio game, he was getting asked about the run game, and he was like, "We're about to start running the ball. Like our run game is about to get it figured out." Like he was like, "We're going to run the damn ball," and like I personally will make sure that we're going to run the damn ball. And that was the first time where I was like, "Okay, Austin Sarevald's got a little bit of this in him."
It was so that's why you keep getting all these Iron Buckeye awards.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like Iron Buckeye. Maybe you're just like automatically in that. Jeremiah definitely. I probably put Carnell Tate. I think Carnell has that kind of like a Mecca-ish like chip on his shoulder of like, I'll show you guys that I'm the best, even if the guy next to me is better.
Yeah.
Brandon Inniss has it. In terms of like personality, he's got it.
I mean, he's the reason the rest of the receiver room has it right now. So, yes.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Brandon Inniss, I'm sure he was part of some of that extracurricular stuff happening in practices. At least, maybe he wasn't throwing hands, but I'm sure he was jawing away a little bit.
I'll say this: he wasn't disappointed that people fought in practice.
Yeah. Caden Curry absolutely has that. Caden Curry is like, I compared him to Max Crosby in terms of like the engine that he plays with. I was watching the Giants play the Saints earlier before we started recording. The way Cam Scatabo runs is like how Caden Curry plays defensive end, if that makes any sense at all. Like Cam Scatabo was running. I was like, that kind of reminds me of Caden Curry a little bit. I think Caden McDonald's got it. He's just kind of at a bit of a thankless position.
Mm-hmm.
Jermaine and Davison both play with that edge for sure.
They are the edge.
Yeah, they are the edge. I'm sure Jermaine was probably part of some of that jawing as well. I mean, Arvell Reese is Arvell Reese. So yeah, he's absolutely got it. Sonny Styles, I think, in he has it in like the buttoned up like way, whereas some other guys like play with your hair on fire way.
He's the presidential candidate to, you know what it is? Have you seen Power before?
No.
Not. Okay, never mind. He's the face of the organization. Arvell Reese does the dirty work.
And it's fine. Someone's got to be the face. But that's the thing. It goes back to his quote earlier. Like, he's got it because he's the one saying, when we meet on Sunday, pretend that we lost. Like that's
a crazy thing to say. That's
Caleb Downs has it because his brain is a computer and he's programmed to have it. So that's done. And I think Jalen McClain's got it. We haven't talked to him a ton, but I think he's got a little bit of that.
I think that Jalen McClain and Arvell Reese are on the same side of the fence, and Caleb Downs and Sonny Styles are on the same side of the fence.
Yeah,
and I think that's good. It's, you know what it is? It's the Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, but we can do it at multiple positions. Arvell Reese and Jalen McClain belong on the Quinshon Judkins side of the train. Sonny Styles, Caleb on the Travion side of the train. I would put Art Carnell on the Travion side, though his is a little more subtle though, because he'll have moments where if you go, "Hey, Carnell, y'all the best receivers," of course we are. What's wrong with you? Are you insane? Versus Brandon is being like, you didn't even ask him about that. He just decided to tell you that these are the best receivers in the country.
Brandon Inniss told Jeremiah Smith, "Hey, can you start acting like you're the best receiver in the country?
Yeah,
like stop being so humble."
JJ is like that, but he has the profile of Caleb and Sonny. So he can't always do that in front of cameras. I think CJ Donaldson it's the South Florida guys. They just kind of have that. And the Cincinnati guys. So Jermaine and Phillip Daniels. But to the point of the whole point of why we did that is I don't think we would have had as long of a list last year. And it's not because those players didn't have an edge and they won a national championship. They were very good. It's just more respectful, less dirty work, more presidential package.
Did they go to the White House?
Yeah. And I'm wondering if this team maybe takes on the personality of its coach a little more. And because this team has a coach who also has a national championship, their head coach is letting it loose a little bit more with us. And you see it spilling out a little bit more than maybe in the past. Where in the past, it was, we'll look at the film, talk about it later. He'll talk about the benefits of having the iPad on the side of the field, on the sidelines, and just kind of keep it real button up. And now it's not, here's the benefit. Hey, we benefit from having the iPad on the sideline. It's, hey, this is what I saw on the sidelines. Bo Jackson needs to take care of the football. And I'm wondering how that can translate when, again, as you mentioned earlier, it's a team after a team who is also completely resetting its roster, a bunch of guys who have something to prove, and they all have a little shank ability to them. That's fun to watch. And I think that's why this defense is so good right now. Last thing, what do we want to learn about Ohio State over the next 2 weeks?
Continue learning how good they are.
Yeah.
I want to see, I think I kind of have a grasp on what running back is going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd like to, I guess, get that confirmed. I think the rotation at running back is going to be, like if we were to compare it to Quinshon and Travion, I think it's going to be Bo Jackson, James Peoples, and then CJ Donaldson having kind of his situational packages. Because CJ played I think only 10 snaps against Minnesota, and at least 2 of them were at fullback. Maybe 3 of them were at fullback. So like true running back reps was really low for him. And I think the big question has been, if you have 3 running backs you want to play, how do you ensure that any of them get into any sort of rhythm if you're rotating 3 guys? And I think the answer might be, hey, we're still going to rotate 2 guys. There's just going to be a third guy who we use in different ways. I think that's where they are with running back. And I like to see it across the next few games to kind of reaffirm that, I guess.
Yeah, I think that James Peoples and Bo Jackson are your traditional running backs, and they're just like, CJ Donaldson's like a gadget player. And I don't know, he might be coming out the backfield catching the ball. He might be playing fullback. It might be in I formation using him. He might be playing tight end on this snap. Who knows? But they're just going to use him all over the place, which I think is interesting because it opens up the creativity for what they can do offensively. And I think CJ Donaldson is why they've been able to do some 2 running back sets this year in a way that they really only did it in the T formation and like 1 or 2 other times last year. CJ Donaldson's versatility as a guy who grew up playing receiver, showed up at West Virginia as a tight end, and then became a power back at West Virginia, and then lost that weight and gained some speed. There's just some, whether he's getting the ball or not, there's just some things you can do in terms of looks offensively that I do not think they have had the ability to do in recent years because they didn't have a guy like CJ Donaldson. I think the thing I want to learn is every year there is a freshman who comes along later in the year and you see them start to pop later on. Last year is the anomaly in that because JJ existed, but you saw Garrett in 2019. This is where he started to really.
Last year.
Yeah, you're right. So see, there they go. Using Jeremiah when I didn't have to. 2019, you had Garrett. This is where you started to see him find his form. 20, it's a mess because it's COVID. But I think Jackson Smith-Njigba was probably finding his form behind the scenes. Marvin and Emeka as non-starters, but even JT and Jack were starting to get a little bit more every single week. Travion Henderson was starting to find his own, but that was a young team. I'm trying to remember. 2022, not as much off the top of my head that I can remember. 2023, Cardell played a lot of snaps against Penn State in 2023 because Emeka Egbuka was out with an injury. So that's when we started to see signs that Cardell Tate could do this. And then, as you mentioned, Edric Houston, all of a sudden he's playing defensive tackle and he's playing 10 to 15 snaps a game in playoff games. It started here. So is it Devin maybe getting a little bit more? Even like Aaron Scott's not a freshman, but Ryan Day said he was going to start playing more, and then he played 4 snaps. So I guess we'll see with that one. But is it Devin Smith, Devin Sanchez? Is it Nate Roberts? Is it Jarquez Carter? Zion Grady, especially now that this is news by the time we're recording this. CJ Hicks is redshirting for the 2025 regular season. He already played in 4 games. He can play in the playoffs in the postseason. It's just for the regular season, you can only play in 4. And he played in all 4 of the games before the Minnesota game and did not play against Minnesota. He is redshirting because this is his final year of eligibility if he does not redshirt. And so the plan, to my understanding, is that I don't think he is going to be transferring. In fact, I'm about 85% sure he'll still be at Ohio State next year. It's just, he just moved to defensive end. He just does not have the necessary tape to get drafted to the NFL right now. I don't even think he has the necessary tape to make a roster right now. But if he gets another year under his belt to transition to defensive end, especially with some of the stuff we're seeing Matt Patricia do, I don't think whether Matt Patricia is back next year or not, I do not think this stuff is going to go away. I think it'll do CJ Hicks some good. Same thing goes for Malik Hartford at secondary. At safety, he has 2 games left of eligibility, though. So, I mean, he's the number 3 safety, so you probably want to use those wisely. But the plan is for him to redshirt this year as well. We'll see if that redshirt is to continue his career at Ohio State or maybe he enters the portal after the season. But what that does do is open up opportunity for Zion Grady, who I think flashed when Kenyatta Jackson went down with an injury on Saturday. It opens up Fahim Delane to potentially do more as a safety for you this year. So just these younger guys who've been here for 10 months now, they've reached the point in the year where Ryan Day will talk about how like you're not really a freshman anymore because you've been here, you've been through the spring, you've been through a fall camp, and you've been through at least half of the season. It's time to start getting it. And I'm wondering if some of these guys where some opportunities maybe just showed up and popped up, if they start filling these roles. And when we're talking about the 2026 roster, we're talking about guys who could be starters in 2026. So get the text 614-350-3315. It's a 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. That's our Leave No Doubt pod, where we maybe took a bigger picture view of the challenges of repeating, what we think of Ohio State's chances of repeating, and what we think of Ohio State's chances of maybe being the first ever 16-0 team in college football history. That's our Leave No Doubt pod. As you're listening to this, Andrew and I are recording a recruiting pod for tomorrow, Tuesday, because flip season is upon us, and it seems like Ohio State's pretty busy. There were a lot of people in town over the weekend for what's Ohio State's only home game of October, and then Tuesday we'll be back in the Woody talking with Ryan Day as Ohio State prepares to go to Champaign, Illinois for the first time in Ryan Day's tenure as the head coach. They were supposed to play in 2020, but the game got canceled because of COVID, so they finally get to make it to Champaign this year to face an Illinois team in what will be Ohio State's second game against a ranked opponent this year. 614-350-3315, 3-week free trial, $3.99 after that. For Stefan Krajisnik, I am Stephen Means. Talk to you guys later.